Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen O'Brien, and welcome to All About the Gig. I'm extremely excited to introduce our first guest, but before we do, I just want to go through some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the comment section, and we'll get to them towards the end of the stream. Our first guest today, I'm very excited to introduce, is a Grammy-nominated producer, musician, engineer, social media influencer, and founder of audio engineering academy Produce Like a Pro. He has a clientele list that includes the Fray, Powter, Aerosmith, and that's just to name a few. His work has also been featured on TV and films such as Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, Grey's Anatomy, Scrubs, and Lost. He has also one of the biggest YouTube channels for music and music production called Produce Like a Pro, which has over 400,000 subscribers. Produce Like a Pro is a masterclass education program where you can hone and perfect your engineering and production skills. If you haven't checked it out already, get on it and check it out. With that, I am absolutely delighted to introduce Warren Huart. Welcome to the stream.
Hello. How are you? Where are you based?
I am based in Dublin, Ireland.
In Dublin.
Yes.
I'm English, so I can hear the Irish accent. My mother. My mother is my mother's technically Irish, yeah.
No way.
Although she sounds quite English now. She's been in England for such a long time, yeah. But
yeah, absolutely amazing. Warren, thanks a million for jumping on. It's absolutely an honor to have you on here. I've been following you for years. You've pretty much taught me everything I know, so it's a pleasure to have you.
Right.
Everything okay? All good?
Yeah, everything's fantastic. My wife's calling, so I just handed the phone to Eric to field it. I told her I was going straight onto a live call, but maybe she didn't quite register on it.
No worries.
But it's quite all right. The life carries on. I see. I've got the chat up here, so I see lots of our academy members here. Hey, hey, Anita, Sheila, Mark, Chris, Andy. How are you all? Jürgen, how are you? Yeah. So it's rather good.
So, Warren, for anyone that maybe hasn't seen some of your videos, would you like to give a quick introduction and background to yourself and where you're from and how you kind of got into music production?
Wow. So a little question.
Yes.
just a quick little question. I mean, I got into music because it was unavoidable in my household. My father wasn't a musician, but he was a painter and a sculptor. And he essentially just played music. I don't know, felt like 24 hours a day. Lots of classical music, some jazz, a decent amount of jazz, and a little bit of pop music here and there, rock music, if you like. But quite frankly, he was a bit of a musical snob, and I mean that in a good sense. And so he would only play like the best of the best. So the pop music I heard was like 60s stuff. He would play like Moody Blues, all kinds of, Nights in White Satin. I remember playing, I covered it the other day, used to play that all of the time. When Mike Oldfield, he played Tubular Bells. It was just like, other than that, it was all just classical music and jazz. And I remember when I was super, super little, like far too young to like be fans of music yet, he bought a Night at the Opera, Queen's A Night at the Opera for me for Christmas. And being the musical aficionado that he was, he gave me the album with these words and said, "This is worthy." So like, this is good. This fits in with all of the classical music and jazz that I'm bringing you up on. Because other than that, it was like Django Reinhardt, Ella Fitzgerald, Joe Pass, MJQ, Modern Jazz Quartet, and then Beethoven and Brahms and Shostakovich and Mussorgsky and Tchaikovsky and Haydn, Mozart. It was like, that's what I was listening to and then suddenly I was allowed to listen to this music, and I put on these big Sony headphones, that were like, probably like Princess Leia ears stuck into the side of my head on Christmas Day. And just was like mesmerized. I was really little, and I was just like looking and reading all the lyrics and looking at these photographs of all these guys with long hair And I just remember not really understanding, but knowing that I wanted this, whatever that was. I wanted it. I wanted to be in the band. I wanted to record it. But this is like prepubescent. So I had, I had, it wasn't about girls or partying. I was like too little. It was just about music and art. And I think, growing up in a very heavily arts-based kind of family, it was a massive blessing. I mean, I went to Covent Garden. I saw opera and ballet. But don't get me wrong, my parents were dirt poor, like super, super poor. They probably my mother would hate me saying that. But it's the truth. We didn't have any money. We lived in a 654 square foot bungalow. And it was 2-bedroom, and there was 5 of us. So my parents had 1 bedroom. I shared a bedroom with my brother, who was 10 years younger than me. And it was like barely big enough to have 1 bed in it. And then there was an extension that my dad built himself, called the box room. It was supposed to be like a storage room, and my sister had this tiny little mattress stuck in it, and she grew up in that. But we didn't feel poor necessarily, because we grew up in a nice little village in the home counties in Hampshire in England, and so we had a lovely upbringing. I can't really complain. It's it's like money is kind of relevant, isn't it? Irrelevant when it comes to having a happy childhood. But falling in love with music, and then I think also growing up in a nice area where a lot of the kids I went to school with in the local school came from very wealthy families, also gave me that kind of other part, that entrepreneurial kind of like, I want to do something with my life. I'm happy that I have loving parents. I'm happy that I love music and all this stuff, but I need to grow this into something more. And
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So that's where the entrepreneurial side came in. That's where, I owned studios. I started studios. Everything I've done is bootstraps. Nobody's ever given me $1 in their life. There's no venture capitalist at the end of this. There's nobody here that owns a piece of me. Everything was done just, when I first discovered YouTube, I just thought one of the things that was missing, especially like 5 years ago when I started, was a sense of credibility. There was a lot of people that were professional YouTubers. There still are. Yeah. And there was a couple of people. There was Dave Pensado, but I didn't see anything sort of in the middle. I saw a lot of like, hey man, you're amazing. Oh yeah, no, you're amazing. I saw a lot of kind of backslappy kind of things talking about how incredible people were, and and that seemed a little elitist for me. And then I saw a lot of beginner channels starting up. Then I did see, unfortunately, a lot of people teaching stuff that they really shouldn't have been teaching because they didn't really understand yet. So I'm thinking to myself, where's the gap? Well, the gap is bringing everybody together. The gap for me was like being able to interview a really famous mixing engineer or a producer or engineer, master, whatever, being able to interview these people, but bring them into the reality. Because the one thing I pathologically have always hated is this sort of idea that there's only like half a dozen people that are really good at their jobs and we're all should be bowing down. That sort of like, bada boom, bada bing, I'm the sound hit kind of attitude. I hate it. It's total BS.
And I watched that on your video, actually, the advice, like you did a video recently on should you mix your own music, and you were just saying go for it. And funny enough, that day I was in that moment, where I was just kind of frustrated on whether, I should put money aside and actually get someone to mix it, or just, hone my craft and kind of mix it myself. And after watching that video, I just said, I'm doing it,
Good for you. Yeah, good for you. I mean, it's what's interesting. We put that post up on let me see if I can find it on Instagram. I don't know if I can find it quickly. And one of the where is it? Should you mix your music? Jack Douglas. I think
it was a few weeks back.
I'll find it in a second, only because I want to demonstrate this. And one of the first people to respond was Al Schmidt.
Wow.
And he wrote, "Of course you should." And then of course I have, all these people debating me of like, "Whoa, no." And I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
You want to argue with the guy with the 27 Grammys or not? And there's no accident he's won 27 Grammys. It's because people come back to him because of the music that he records and mixes. And it's this idea, all the albums that we grew up listening to that are considered to be the greatest albums of all time were all recorded by the team in the room. The first person that emailed...
That's what I loved. I loved that part of the video.
One of the first people that messaged me back and went, "No, you're wrong, Dark Side of the Moon." And I'm like, actually, no. You know, I'm blessed. My aunt and uncle are friends with Nick Mason. And I could, when people like debate things because they read this person who said this person and heard from that guy, all I can say is, like, you know, what actually happened on Dark Side of the Moon is they needed a mediator. They needed somebody to come in and help focus this incredible talent that they had in the room. They had 4 of the most amazing musicians that have ever lived in a room, and songwriters and performers, and they were doing Dark Side of the Moon. And they needed 1, a mediator, 2, an extra set of hands because it's a non-automated console. And Chris Thomas came in with Alan Parsons. And they mixed the record together. Yeah. And so somebody tried to use that as an example of why I was wrong. And all they really did was illustrate why I'm right.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
The alternative would have been to take those 2-inch tapes, stick them into a FedEx container, and ship them off to somebody on the other side of the world, and then wait to hear mixes. And that's the alternative. No, and it's like, I have no problem being a mixer. I think we should all learn to be great mixers, and it is okay to mix other people's stuff, and it is okay to also give your stuff to other people. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to empower people and encourage them and get away from this idea, this sort of thing that really exploded in the 90s. It was really the 90s when CD sales were through the roof. It was a horrible time for music as well as being a great time. The horrible part was it was the same 6 people making every album, mixing every album. And let's be honest, listen to some late 90s, early 2000s rock. It's freaking horrible. I'm not talking about grunge. I'm not talking about, you know, Soundgarden and
new metal
records. I'm talking about, yes, when it was like literally put on the album. Mm-hmm. And every kid at the time said this. So I'm not saying something that wasn't aware. They're like, why are we, it killed the music industry. They're like, why are we having to buy albums? I want the one song that's on the radio. And what do? I buy an album, and it's 10 of exactly the same sounding songs. It got into the system. It was all recorded, especially when Pro Tools was first taking off. You know, and thank you. Pro Tools first started taking off, and everything was like edited tight, had the same kick and snare sample on every single song. All the guitars were recorded in one time, all the bass time, everything. And literally every song was like, and all the vocals were, I don't want you, and it was just like horrific. You put on those albums now, and they do not stand the test of time. All of the soul was removed, and it was the beginning of not the end, but it was what really helped kill CD sales. I remember every single kid in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s was saying, of course we use Napster. People were debating, because you're making us spend $17.99 on a CD for one song. You're not releasing it anywhere on singles anymore. You're leveraging us, forcing us to buy an album. And, you know, and that's what killed a lot of the traditional music industry off. You know, America was so far behind, in particular, as I'm sure you've read and everybody knows, in getting into streaming for a start. I mean, how long did we have Spotify over in Europe? For like 3 or 4 years before it came over here?
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah, and it's just, we just can't fight the inevitability. And I just love this idea that that you can be empowered, you can make your own music. We just have to break through those old ideas of these handful of geniuses, and, you know, the smell the glove, the kiss the ring kind of mentality.
Yeah. And what do you say to kind of, I know that there's some very extremely high profile mixing engineers that have the opinion of, because it's a new age now and a new kind of, you know, way of learning, i.e. through YouTube, a lot of mixers and producers, young producers like myself, would never have the opportunity to really work on hardware. So what's your opinion of, you know, they're not a mixer because they've never worked with hardware, they're using plugins and learning on a laptop? Some very high profile mixing engineers have that opinion that they should be called engineers, not mixers.
It's so hilarious, isn't it? Because they're the same guys that have their own plug-in range. It's just like, I watch videos with these guys like trashing plugins at the same time as trying to sell their plugins. I mean, it's like you can look around. I see your studio. We talked off camera a second ago about those great Tom Anderson guitars you have. I need to buy one of his Strats. Tim Pierce has one, and it's one of the best playing Strats I've ever played in my life. Hats off to you, Tom Anderson. Incredible. But if you look around my studio,
there it is. It's like
gorgeous.
Yeah, lovely.
They're total players' guitars. I went into Guitar Center about 5 years ago, and they had a used one on the wall. And I had a used one on the wall, and I almost bought it. I wish I had.
Yeah. Intonation. Anyway, sorry, we're getting sidetracked.
Everything. Phenomenal guitars. Phenomenal. But anyway, to get back to the subject, it's like I have all of this gear, and all this gear, with the exception of a handful of pieces, most of what you see in the studio, I have owned from before ever doing any kind of YouTube stuff. Now, I got the Laney through a relationship with Laney. I got the Focals and the Callies, but those Genelecs have been in my studio for 25 years. They're what I've been mixing on. This console I've had, ever since I bought this house. It's like most of the equipment, the Pultecs, I have really expensive hardware. However, the world is changing fast. For instance, there is a plugin I tried out today for those watching, which I think can completely change the way that I mix in the box. It is a new plugin, and I have no affiliate sales. I was jokingly saying to Matt this morning when we were writing the email together, I was like, God, I wish we either A, had invented this plugin, or B, had an affiliate sale on it, because frankly, it's fantastic. So it's Brainworks. Again, no affiliate. Wish I did. It's Brainworks Plugin Alliance, and it is the GML portion and a Sontec portion of an EQ. So what it's done is taken two of the best sounding EQs ever and put them into a plugin. They've done that thing that they do where they model everything individually, so you can have different channels. So you can have a left and a right that actually are modeled on the left and the right, as opposed to like just modeling one channel and doubling it. So you can go between exactly the same on both channels or two different analog channels. But the thing about it that's amazing is that you can solo the frequency band. It's going to make low frequency mixing so easy. So I can sit there and I can isolate the kick drum and go, oh, okay. And if I'm hearing too much bass bleed, I can solo that. And then I can go in and I can adjust it and I can listen. Now it's an amazing tool. It could be the first ever digital plugin that I would trust on my master bus, because almost all my friends that mix in the box, say 60% of them, still break out on the master bus. They will still mix in the box, but all of us, we're a little scared. We're a little scared to put a $29 plugin on our mix bus. We don't mind the $29 plugin on the acoustic guitar. That's fine. We've got all these channels, we'll do that. But my mix bus, dump 150 tracks or whatever you get these days through like a $29 EQ. This one I trust.
That's a really good point.
It's a big deal. So I think that's the thing. Otherwise, the hardware is for the input. It's coming in. It's coming in. That is where I need it. Wow, got the video playing in the background. There's some serious lockdown hair going on here.
Absolutely. I'd love to ask you this question. I know you're an extremely talented musician. Just speaking of guitars, a phenomenal guitar player. I've seen, absolutely. I'd love to get your thoughts on how important do you think it is to be, a good musician, to be a successful producer or engineer, or do you think it's important, to have musical theory or be able to play an instrument at all?
I think all of those things are massive assets and can really help you in your career. I mean, I have played officially on many major albums. I did a single with James Blunt a few years ago, and I played guitar on it, and I got credited. That's Ace Frehley. I did an album. I've done 3 albums with him. I did an album with him and Slash playing guitar on my couch. I did all the harmony guitar parts on it, credited. I did actually play the rhythm parts on Fire and Water, but he didn't credit me on it. But shit happens. Did I just swear? Sorry. Schnizzle happened. I can't believe I said that.
It's okay, Stephen over here.
It's been a bit of a last couple of days, as you know. We've had a really crazy couple of days. I'm a little sleep deprived and a little emotionally worn out. But anyway, but ultimately, Yeah, I can't believe I swore. The ultimately, it's a massive asset because Ace can call me from the road like he did 2 years ago and go, Warren, I don't have time to figure out that harmony part in the cover of Emerald by Thin Lizzy, talking about great Irish bands.
Yeah.
Don't get much better than Thin Lizzy.
Absolutely.
So you know that and so he had me play that. I played it, went on the album. Next minute, I'm looking at an album and it's got guitar Ace Frehley, guitar Warren Huart, and I'm like, the 14, 15-year-old kid inside of me is like, it's just like losing it. I'm on a song with Guns N' Roses guitar player and Kiss guitar player and little old me, Warren.
Yeah, and didn't Ace give you one of his Les Pauls? Did I see?
He gave me one of his Les Pauls. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And
gave me a custom shot one. Yeah, 3 pickup. Live Budokan. Yeah,
it looks beautiful.
So it is a great attribute, being able to play. Here's a little bit of the rub for me. Because one thing you mentioned, and I totally agree with, is the theory side as well. Here's a little bit of the rub. There is too much emphasis on that. And I've got to make a video on this, and we've got to talk about this. We've got lots of our Academy members here. Understanding theory is a really huge attribute. Understanding chord sequences, like 1, 4, 5, 6, 2. I mean, once you know a 1, 4, 5 progression, you understand the relationship of the 6. You understand the 2, maybe to a 5, and you get some basic stuff underneath you. I would say more importantly than watching breakdown videos by geniuses wagging fingers and telling you need to know like the blah, blah, blah mode of the so-and-so, which you do not need to know because none of the people you admire ever actually sat there and studied. What you need to know music, which means spend your life listening to people's songs, work them out, use your ear, develop your ear. Your ear is the biggest tool you can have. You know, Tom Petty made a great quote. He said, if he'd been a good guitar player, he wouldn't have been a very good songwriter. His point is like, what do you want to do? Do you want to sit there and play 6 to 8 hours wearing your fingers out, which is fantastic, like I do still, practice guitar, or would you take some of that time and listen to some great songs and learn them and develop your ear and understand harmony and stuff? Theory is really, really amazing, but don't get too caught up in the trap of all these videos of people telling you, oh, well, you see what they did is they went to, because the people that wrote the song didn't know that with almost 110% telling you to. It's all very well going, well, you know, well, what he did is he did the blah, 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 blah. That's cool. It doesn't make you a better songwriter. What makes you a better songwriter is learning it. Take that energy. Stop worrying about like, oh, you know, the 3 a dominant is beautiful. And you hear it.
Yeah.
But somebody telling you, well, see what happened is they took them out to blah, 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 and did blah, 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 blah. You know, and you go, oh my God, this guy's a genius because he's explained it to me.
And it's really nice to hear that because there is so many videos out there that are extremely complicated, and sometimes I watch them and
it's self-serving BS. It really is. It's all about people making videos and going, I'm really smart. Follow me. And it's like, you're actually not, because you're a flashy guitar player, but you actually have never written a song that's worth singing along with. You know, it's like, I would much rather listen to, you know, like
a bit of Bob Marley.
You know, and do you really think he knew what a mixolydian was?
Yeah, same as some of like the Nirvana stuff as well. Some of the melodies are amazing. And
I watched somebody explain what was actually happening, and because, you know, they were like, I can't remember the explanation, like what mode it was and how they changed, you know, from, you know, with a minor third there being a major chord. And I watched somebody explain it away in a theory terms. This is what happened. Kurt Cobain picked up the guitar and went,
yeah. He let it rip.
That sounds good. I should write a song on that. That's what actually happened.
And like for home, you know, kind of lower budget home musicians and producers, what would be like your recommended kind of go-to signal chain for like a home setup, you know, i.e. laptop interface? And because most of us, you know, like the younger generation, we're pretty limited to our home kind of bedroom setup. That's where I watch and learn all your tutorials. What would be your recommendation? If you had like maybe three items, maybe a mic, interface, laptop, sound card.
Well, I think I very firmly believe, a little bit like with gear, like with musicians, it's like there's 100 people for every one job. There's at the moment in LA, there are 10,000 engineers that aren't working much at the moment because of the pandemic. You choose the one that you want to work with that speaks your language, that you can communicate with, that you can hang with. That is who you work with. When you hire a guitar player, it's because, yes, they can play that Jimi Hendrix part you want. You know that they've got the great feel, but you also work with the people you like. That's the skill set that really is really, really super important. There's somebody knocking on the door, Eric.
Got a visitor.
Got a visitor.
Bring them in.
It's Izzy come to say hello. And we'll, come in. I thought you were here before we did this, but it's okay. Go see Eric.
Yeah, because there's so much focus and there's so much choice out there now. It's like some of the Universal Audio stuff I find as a home engineer, producer is it works well. I was curious to get your feedback.
Well, my analogy was going to be, sorry, because I got lost with but my analogy is like you use gear. So for me, it's like I use audience stuff and I use UA stuff. I also have some Apogee stuff, and I have some DigiDesign stuff, and I have a Lavery converter. I own all of those, and we have an RME. Now, not an RME, sorry, a Steinberg. And all of them are absolutely amazing, and they all fulfill different jobs for me. I'm very blessed to have that kind of choice. But I do spend a lot of time getting behind certain companies, particularly Audient and UA, because of this. They are easy people to work with, and they seem to have really good customer service. They're not, there's a couple of people out there we know that are like a huge conglomerate, and they're just like freaking boxing it up and throwing it out the door. The thing with Audient is like, I can get the guys on the phone before they even knew who I was. And my customers, people that work with me, my clients, like working with them because they respond to them and they treat them really well. Now, does that mean the ID44 I've got here is the best unit ever made at the price point? I don't know. I actually don't care because it sounds amazing. All of the videos we do when we do those mic tests are done cheaply through this to demonstrate that you can do it with inexpensive equipment. So we like to practice what we preach. But the reason why we like Audient is because it doesn't break down. And even if it did break down, which one thing broke down years ago, they look after us. And so that to me is actually more important than anything else.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Really good customer service, caring about the people. I also think for Audient as a relatively young company, they're not new, but they're relatively young. They have something to prove. So they're coming out like that Evo they brought out, which I don't have handy, or else I go, we've done recordings on it. To be honest, if I was to do another quick demo, I'd rather just plug in the Evo because you can just set the level and start playing. Why do I need to, if I'm trying to capture an idea, why do I have to spend, 10 minutes going, I'm going to get my gain structure right and blah, 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 blah. If it does it for me and it gives me a result I can use on a record, I'm happy. When you read stuff with Jeff Emmerich or or the interviews, he'd always say the reason why they use the mics they use and the gear they used is because it was plugged in. And the AKG D19 became a very popular microphone with them because it was a dynamic microphone. It could handle the high SPLs, and he could literally just, not that he was ever rationalizing it like that. It's over explaining. Yeah. But what it meant was it was a utilitarian mic that was plugged in, and it could be like, acoustic guitar, vocal, overhead, electric guitar, bass. Yeah. It became, they weren't sitting there auditioning, the whole of Abbey Road's mic collection. Today we're going to see which is the best microphone.
Absolutely. And
guitar. John Lennon, Jack will tell you, it was a demanding artist. Everybody says that. You read all the interviews and stuff. He was demanding. He had an idea. He's an artist. I need to put this down now. With the Imagine session, and is it Phil McDonald, I think, was the engineer, and you can hear him getting visibly annoyed. He's like, Phil, let's get rolling. I want to get this idea down. And you hear him getting frustrated. So what are you thinking? Like, oh no, excuse me, I've just got to go to the warehouse. I'm thinking the 67, the 00491 would have a better high-end frequency response. So just give me about half an hour and we'll set it up. No,
Yeah.
pull it over and get going. So I think that it's about what can you afford.
Yeah. Do you think, like, did you cover thinking? Do you think maybe, you know, people overthink gear too much? Then, like, I watched your Everlong, you know, breakdown video, and you know, like the engineer, his name forgets me now, but like he used pretty standard mics, you know, and I remember you being kind of like, oh really? Like you used that? It was that straightforward, you know. So do you think maybe there's an element of overthinking the process as opposed to getting the product, you know, or the music down?
Yeah, I think no, I think you're very right. It's a very important point. Yes. You know, necessity is the mother of invention. If you've only got you know, a certain amount of pieces of equipment, make a great record. You know, I'm not stupid and naive. I don't believe that it's because of bad gear that people make something good or bad. It's got nothing, you know, the Beatles made recordings on 4 tracks that we still love, you know, 4-track 1-inch tape machines. Now that isn't a 4-track cassette that we still love. Do I think if it was 1978, 79, 80, and they had tracked on an 80 series console to a beautiful 2-inch Studer, maybe been able to sync up 2 of them, so have 48 tracks and then mixed it on an SSL, do I think that would have been amazing? Heck yes.
Yeah,
you know? Of course, they just would have had that talent if they carried on going, and they would have kept on making more and more beautiful sounding music. I'm not stupid. I don't believe that, oh, you have to only use a U47 and a D19 through a 1-inch 4-track. You know, I love those kind of equipment, but they used what they had. They then, you know, they made Abbey Road, you know, their last album that they recorded on an 8-track. There's a couple of songs off the White Album that were done on 8-track. And they sound amazing. And they started using solid state desks, not tube desks. You know, they used whatever was available and whatever was going to make it better. So, you know, I'm not one of these guys that's a Luddite that thinks, you know, everything that's vintage is amazing and everything is crap. I can't buy into that whole idea. I can't buy into the idea that musicians were better in the 70s than they are now. Half the channels I watch, it's all like, John Bonham was a genius and everybody else sucks. I mean, I cannot tell you how many videos. It's a good way of, you know, of selling yourself, because it's a sort of like an accepted fact.
Yeah.
Kids don't know what they're doing anymore, and auto-tune and reading and blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's successful. I could probably increase my YouTube if I take that tact. If tomorrow we did a video on John Bonham and why he was a genius and why things are too gridded and too this and too auto-tune, if I started doing that, I would probably get more views. But you and I know, and anybody rational, that's total BS, and that's just selling to an idea to basically reinforce yourself. And that's not what I'm about. I'm all about community. To me, it's like there are people currently here that are unbelievably talented that are on this chat, that are great songwriters, that are great musicians. I mean, I'm going to sing, I don't want to single out too many people, but Chris Ibbotson, who's on here, he brings in mixes sometimes, Chris, if you're still here, that we listen to, and he remixes them and changes the feel and the groove and puts new instruments in it. And we're all just like,
it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, like on that point, I mean, that's why I think your channel is so important, because you are one of the only voices out there that's kind of giving this perspective as like, you know, there's music to be made now, and like do it yourself, and like, you know, kind of giving us the kind of power to kind of go do it. So it's you know, it's massively beneficial for us. So keep doing what you're doing. I know you've got a client who's just going to be coming in the afternoon. I'm curious to know, like, what kind of prep would you do with a client who comes to work with yourself? Like, would you do pre-production before they even come to the studio, or what's your general approach to working with a client?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think everything is fluid. You know, I think every artist, I mean, this necessity, again, is the mother of invention. So quite often I'm working with somebody in a completely different country, and I might never meet them. So, or maybe they just fly in to do vocals only and I track other stuff. I'm about to start a session like that. Obviously, in the session we're doing today, we tracked live in a room, and I sat there in the back of the room with a face mask on for a day, and it was not ideal, but it was in LA. I didn't have to travel. You know, we're restricted now. You know, we were supposed to go to Nashville to do a masterclass, and we've had to like not cancel it, but we're going to have to reschedule it till people feel safe. You know, half the people that were going said that they were a little reluctant to travel. And I have to respect that. My wife wasn't very happy about me traveling, but I was going to do whatever we have to do. So at the moment, we're in a weird kind of situation, but ultimately each situation is different. If you want the perfect scenario is you sit down with the singer, and whoever the writers were, the singer and the guitar player, singer and piano, whatever it might be, you sit down, you work on the arrangements, the song, you get the tempos right, you work on maybe some lyrical ideas, you make sure it's super hooky but still credible. You work on with them for as long as it takes. Could be 1 week, could be 2 weeks. Then you go into the studio with the band and you see the new changes. What I do is I'd let the band have a week on their own to work through it on their own and refine it. I don't want to stamp myself on it. Then I would go in for another week and do pre-production and then work it up and get those grooves right and get that stuff. I did that with The Gallery, one of my favorite bands I've ever worked with. Didn't become successful. They broke up before they could, but there was everything in there. So, you know, like the pushes on the drums, fills at the right time, parts were worked out and really thought out, and the songs are super hooky. That's the perfect way. But that's that's a 6 weeks process on at least 6 weeks on an album. 3 weeks minimum on an EP. These days, bands show up. They send you the demos. They show up. You got 3 days. You record everything, and then you mix it. And that's the reality. But that's not the perfect way of doing it. It's just the reality of doing it. You know, it's.
Yeah, gotcha. And let me ask you, when you're in the producer engineering seat and like you're working with a client or an artist, and you have to give feedback, which may not be maybe negative feedback, I suppose, maybe interpreted as negative feedback. How do you manage delivering that to an artist? Like, i.e., if you know something's wrong and it needs to change for the benefit of the song, what's your technique on philosophy of kind of delivering, feedback, critique, I guess?
I mean, I think it's always about balance. Vocals, I think the best way to illustrate that for me is I always talk about recording vocals. There's nothing more personal when it comes to recording than working with a vocalist. It doesn't get any more personal than that, because the thing about playing guitar, you give me a guitar, like we'll talk about Queen for a second. One album. Totally at you. One album you got a disco song, you got a 50s songs, and you got Play My Game, Save Me, all on one album. Same band. The singer stays the same the whole time. The singer doesn't suddenly turn into Elvis on one song, even though the band can. The band can be freaking, John Deacon can start playing some 50s 12-bar rock and roll riffs. And then, Brien can get a Telecaster and mimic some, like, put a bit of slap on there and suddenly play like a really convincing kind of 50s rock and roll solo that he would have grown up as a child. But Freddie Mercury is Freddie Mercury on every single one of those songs. He holds the whole thing together. That's amazing. However, it just illustrates that you're working with a singer. It's the best example of what your question, because a singer has that voice, and yes, of course, you can whisper more, you can get more breathy, we can push the range, we can work on the dynamics, but you're still Freddie Mercury, you're still Steve O'Brien, you're still John Smith, you know what I mean? You're still going to be that singer. So you have to remember that when you're working with a singer. So if you start being critical in a way that is not positive, you are basically telling them that they're not good. That's not a way to get a performance. So if you've just done a vocal take, for instance, and one line is good, only one line of that vocal take, and it's happened with some of the biggest singers in the world, that the only thing they've done is like the second line of the second verse.
Wow.
So I got the second line of the second verse is the only thing that's good. And now I've got this situation. What do? I go to that second line and I go, wow, John, I'm making up names. I love the phrasing on here. Listen to the phrasing. Look at the way you did that. And look, that I emotionally connect to that. Wow, that is so good. Let's see if we can bring that in more into the whole take.
So pick out the good parts and go backwards from there.
Yeah, rather than going, dude, I mean, I've been in rooms with quote unquote producers, usually A&R guys that are now producers, so they got their point as an A&R guy. Now they want their points as producers. I've been in the room in those situations. So many of us have been in with like the manager is producing the band, I had somebody a few years ago email me and I'd worked with him and he goes, I'd like to hire you to engineer my band's new album and I'm going to produce it. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to be here to train you to be a producer. It's just like producer is something that you work on, you learn, you techniques that you get. It's not just like you don't just call yourself a producer, And I don't mean that in a wagging finger way. I mean like, it's a different set of skills. It's not just about building tracks. It's about working with others and encouraging them and bringing great performances out of them. And that is something that you have to do, whether it's Steven Tyler or Stephen Smith. It doesn't really matter. They're still looking to you for that kind of inspiration.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, and I'd love to touch on that for a second because a lot of kind of musicians, specifically musicians, maybe out there, don't actually know the difference between a producer and an engineer. Would you be able to give us a really kind of quick breakdown of the main differences? Because sometimes I think musicians get confused and think it's the same thing.
Say it one more time, so I'm not entirely sure what you mean.
So the difference between like an engineer and a producer, like as you just said there, sometimes.
I think I understand what you mean. I think these days they sort of are the same thing for so many people. I don't actually disagree that is not an important thing. I think you need engineering chops regardless.
Yeah.
Michael Beinhorn would never say that he's an engineer. He's worked with some of the biggest engineers in the world. But he wouldn't say that he's an engineer, but he's engineered. He's done many such sessions where it's because a lot of the times, like Howard Benson's the same way. He always hires Mike Naplotnikov, but he came up as an engineer. So he has an engineer. But when Howard does vocals with an artist, just him and the artist.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because he wants, and so he's going to adjust and engineer it. It's a skill that you need. I think the old idea of the producer sitting in the back of the room going, and I've been in those rooms.
Yeah.
Hey, so what do you think? And the producer's like, yeah, good vibe. I like
smoking
that.
A cigar, some whiskey.
Yeah, I dig the vibe on that last take. Yeah, give me another one. Keep up the vibe, man. God, I've heard that 100 times from 100 different guys.
That's really...
you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, back in the days of like Motown, a lot of the producers their job was, as a producer, was to hire the right players, the right arrangers, get the right song, put it all together, hire the studio. That was a whole different thing. And a very incredibly important part of it. Matt says, how about to co-produce? How does that relationship work? I think it's the same thing. It's like you're working with an artist who has maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums under their belt. They're probably going to bring in a lot of what they want. So co-producing with the artist can be good. But in that situation, you do need to work out some kind of dynamic and it will naturally happen. You don't want to get into a situation where you're fighting over everything. And trust me, it does happen.
I can imagine. I'd love to just kind of change direction a little bit and just ask you, talk about social media for a second. How did you find, stepping from maybe like from, behind the console into the kind of social media platform where you've become a very strong figure as a musical influencer? How did you find that dynamic changing and stepping in front of a camera and building your social media platform? Did you find that difficult at the start, or?
I think just being myself. I think the thing for me is I don't really feel any better than anybody. So it's really hard. The question is fantastic, but I just feel like I'm just a voice. I feel like there's thousands of voices out there. There's some with experience to back it up, and there's some that it's in this world. You can watch a video by me or somebody else and then make a video yourself. You don't even have to have done it before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could watch one of my videos on mixing drums and then maybe watch 2 or 3 other people's, do a quick amalgamation and do it again, and that's so much content out there. You know what I mean? So I don't really feel special. I feel like that I feel like the most important thing and job that we have is to build community. And to get rid of the sort of idea, the most successful channels are not about community. They're all about being an expert. Those are the big ones. The 1 million+ subscriber channels are all a bunch of guys, men, going, I am a genius and I know everything. And I'm friends with all these famous people and I'm so amazing. That's not what I'm about. I just don't feel like, I think one of the benefits of growing up, a beautiful, incredible childhood, poor, one of the benefits of that is I don't, especially growing up like you and I did, in Europe, especially, England and maybe even Ireland, you understand where it is, surrounded by, this old kind of upper class mentality, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like they're born into it. You know what I mean? That those of us that weren't born into that, just kind of like we have this little bit of a chip on our shoulder that we can't kind of get rid of. So we don't have this idea that we're better than anybody else. It's very British and Irish as well. It's very much like we don't feel like we're better than anybody else. And so for me, it's just like, I'm just doing it because I want these beautiful people that are here, Sheila, Matt, Andy, who's Country T, Nate, Anita, Chris Ibbotson, all these people here, like on this
hey, everybody.
Yeah, hey, everybody. To me, it's like, that's what it's about. It's like, I talk to these people online, texting, messaging, Skyping, it's like.
And what about the other side of social media? That's I mean, maybe the darker side. Like, do you ever? I mean, there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, right? That are kind of. Does that ever like? Did you find? I mean, it's a very vulnerable position to be in on social media. I feel, especially like when you're educating like yourself. Like, did you find that difficult at the start, or because there's always keyboard warriors, right? They're always going to say like the opposite.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't personally engage them. I see some of our followers do sometimes. We keep it pretty healthy. I had somebody just yesterday just kind of like saying some negative comment about the fact that, with the mixing competition, there was 3 white guys talking. And I'm just like, do you watch my other videos? Our community is one of the most successful communities of bringing all kinds of age groups together, all kinds of everything together. And I don't want to talk up like, but when Pensado did that 97.3%, I was like, ours is about 80-20. So maybe you need to be changing some mentality. We have a lot more women involved in our community. I mean, of the 5 people I see online at this very second talk, I mean, there's more than that, 30 people watching, 5 people commenting, 2 of them are girls. It's just like, I don't need to be, there's always going to be somebody who's more superior, who tells you, that they're better. It's easy to be a keyboard warrior, like you're saying. I just don't really engage it. This is the most I've ever talked about it, to be honest. Normally, I don't even talk about it because there is nothing special about anybody. We're all equally special. And we go out of our way not to be like, hey, look at us. We're so great.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Because
to me, it's like patronizing. My wife holds my whole family together. I can never talk about women in any to even be like, we're going to do a focus on women engineers. Like, don't give me a break. The best mastering engineers in the world, name 5 mastering engineers in the world. 3 of them are women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I don't need to patronize and say, we're featuring women in mastering this week. It's like they've already won.
Yeah, it slows them. Yeah,
this is so patronizing. But people they'll say these kind of comments, and I'm just like, what planet are you on? Are you not seeing where the world is at the moment?
Yeah,
but I don't engage in it. I stay out of politics. I stay out of religion, and I stay out of all of this stuff because, because if we stop pretending and that we're holier than thou and elite and everything, and just remember that we're all human beings and we're all in this together. There's a world pandemic going on. Has anybody noticed? It's like, what else do we need to say that we're all equal? I don't get it,
Totally. I'd love to get some just to hit you with some career advice. I mean,
totally.
Like what do you think is the key to being successful? I mean, because you're successful across so many different disciplines, social media, physically, obviously mixing, engineering, musician. Obviously, you're doing a lot of things extremely, amazingly right. So, what's like your general philosophy, do you think, to being successful in the music industry, having all the success you've had?
I think for me, I remember when Matt Boudreau interviewed me on Working Class Audio, maybe about a year into doing Produce Like a Pro. So we probably had because we were very slow. The first year was like 10,000 subscribers. And then the second year was like 100,000, and then it's only been, so we got 80,000. It was our growth has been like, like this. And, I feel like that phrase, it takes 30 years to become an overnight success. That's sort of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So I to sort of believe that it's very hard for me because the only thing I know is hard work. Somebody complained yesterday about the mixing competition that the multi-tracks weren't done specifically the way they were supposed to,
Yeah, I hear you. Another guest.
I thought you were texting us, we were running a few minutes late. That's okay. Come in. No, come in. Sorry, okay. Our artist has arrived.
Okay, no worries. We won't keep it too much longer.
No, it's okay. But hey, this is real life.
Yeah. I mean, like, did you ever have kind of like any like early blockers early on in your career, like maybe, and that you had to kind of overcome, like that you were just
tons. Yeah. That's
a big challenge, and a lot of people I think lose the heart when they get big blockers. How did you overcome blockers, or what's your approach to them?
Honestly, the only thing is working hard. I mean, for every person that says to me, people say to me, like, oh, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, what you're saying doesn't work. I just come back to them and go, okay, well, did you do this? And they're like, no, because, and they give me a because. And then I'm going, did you try this? And they're like, no, because that. And then I said, did you do this? No, because. It's like, the common denominator in all of that failure is that inability to do all the things. There's that phrase that everybody knows, so I'm just repeating it. It's like successful people have learned to do the things that unsuccessful people won't do. It's as simple as that. Do you want to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning till working till 2 in the morning, and just get back at it? Or do you want to have a few beers, get a bit drunk, sleep through half the next day, and then go, oh, I didn't get signed? I mean, it's as simple as that. And then this whole idea of lucky, I don't even know what that means. If somebody says to me, you were lucky, I'm like, I was lucky that I worked 100 hours that week and the song came out well. That was lucky. Somebody said to me the other day, you just like, you try to tell people that, you couldn't, blah, 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 all these different things. And I'm just like, dude, I grew up in a 654 square foot bungalow in a village. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's grinding. You have to grind it out. That's it, isn't it? It's like,
but people that aren't motivated, that it didn't happen for them, blah, blah. They've always got the 101 reasons why not. And you respond to each one and go, yeah, but if you had done this, like, yeah, but there's always, there's always a reason why. And I don't, to me, it's like, I want to encourage and empower people. I'm not trying to tell them off, so don't get me wrong. It's like there are people in here, these incredible people that only have a certain amount of hours. So poor old Anita, I'm going to pick on her. Anita works a night job in a I don't know what the American term is, but in an old people's home, like a assisted care facility or something. That's right, Anita, isn't that the right word to put it? But anyway, so she's working like in that environment at night, and she's still here in the middle of the day, like learning and communicating. And when she came in, she had like a little piano keyboard and she was like writing like little piece of music. Now she's like mixing songs and doing productions that are far beyond the amount of time that she's put into it, because she has part of a community. She helps people in the community and they help her and they grow together. And that is what it's all about. I think that is the way it really works. A lot of people, they want the quick fix. They want to download the quick plugin or the course or listen to some guy. And the reason why, going back to what we're talking about with the wagging finger kind of mentality, is the reason why that's so successful is because if you pretend that everybody was a genius back then and now everybody doesn't know what they're doing, it also plays into the reason why I'm not successful is because.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, Yeah, it's tough to, I mean, just keeping passionate and keeping the energy high. I mean, that's the hardest thing, isn't it? For everybody to keep motivated. But like, yeah, you just have to work hard. I just want to pull in some questions here. I know you have to jump off, but I just want to put up one question here.
Yeah. Well, Brett says we're blessed to be alive at this time. I agree. It's an amazing time. And Cobra, question for Warren: as a producer creating valuable content for people, how much energy do you put into platforms? Oh, you're reading the one that I'm about. You're reading the one that I was reading that as you put it up. For instance, are you trying to jump on TikTok or focus 100% on? That's a good question. I have an artist who's actually sitting in the other room, and she's 19, 20 years old. We're going to do some stuff on TikTok because that's our audience.
Yeah. It's a big platform now. It's blown up. Everyone's like TikTok. You need to be on TikTok, and I mean, it's a different platform though. You have to kind of have different kind of content. So it's interesting to see how it's going. Listen, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you've a client waiting in there. So
thanks for your patience. I'm sorry I was a little late.
No problem at all.
A bunch of family stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate you jumping on, given the situation. So, but look, listen, for myself and like when I told all my colleagues in Ireland that I was having you on, like I was getting so many messages. So, I mean, look, just on behalf of myself and on the music community, like I'm sure I can speak for everybody. Like, I just want to say thank you personally for all the videos you've put up, the free content. It's pretty much transformed me into kind of where I am at the moment musically. So I really appreciate it, and
that's incredibly kind of you. Like I said, just thank you for being part of it. Because if you're spreading positive attitude and making it about the music and less about all of the other stuff we're talking about, and you're making it about that and community and helping grow stuff together, that's all we can ask for. That really is the secret.
Absolutely, that's it. Well, Warren, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to meet you. I couldn't believe you said yes. So thanks so much for coming on. And anybody that's watching, don't forget to subscribe for some more videos and keep posted. Warren, thank you so much.
Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.